Alright, hello everybody, and today we've got a good video for you all. Today we are looking at the monthly analogs for this upcoming winter, as well as the models. So, we will start off by looking at the month-by-month analog maps, temperature, and precip, kind of break them down and see what we're going to be looking at, or we at least could be looking at for each month of the upcoming winter. And then we'll look at the Jamstack, the Euro monthlies, and the CFS, of course. The most reliable models. No, not exactly, but we'll get into them and at least give them a look and give them a little attention. But, seasonal climate models probably aren't the best thing to, be betting on for this upcoming winter and how it's going to end out. But anyways, starting with December, that is what we are looking at right here. We have changed our analog years a little bit. As you can see, we have temperatures on the left, precip on the right. This is what we were expecting despite changing our analogs on the winter outlook, and that is December is probably going to be our all-around warmest month of the upcoming season for much of the lower 48, really. As you can see on the analogs, there is some hints of a southeast ridge, maybe. Wouldn't be surprised if that builds up from time to time, but, now that we're really close to December, it's worth to look at analogs, but it's also worth to look at the teleconnections, what we've got coming up soon. And, things look good as far as the NAO and the AO and MJO, but unfortunately the PNA seems to kind of just outweigh and overshadow all of those when it's especially negative. So that's one threat that we have. The GFS and the Euro have kind of been playing with the idea that we could be looking at a negative PNA, at least to start the month maybe. That's not a good sign if you guys, want cold and snow on the East Coast, or at least cold and potential for winter weather events. As negative PNA, typically we are looking at cutters and some ridging in the east. So obviously we are going to keep an eye on that, but that's just something recent that the models have been picking on the potential for, at least a negative PNA. And so we'll keep an eye on that. But anyways, temperatures we have just I'd say, really near normal for much of the country. We have a little area of below average temperatures around the four corners, above average temperatures from the plains to the mid-Atlantic, down into the southeast, and then below average temperatures. Now, this is our core area of below average temperatures, really. This is pretty believable, actually, because even if we do have a southeast ridge, you'd still see the cold air and the below average temperatures working its way down into the Great Lakes and far northern New England. So that's pretty believable for even if you do have a southeast ridge. And then above average temps in the northwest, precip wise, you can see this is pretty active. So you're looking at 1 to 2 inches above average for one single month. That's pretty big signal right there for what could be, or it is at least looking like it's going to be a pretty active month. Obviously we're not going to be looking at snow the entire month on the East Coast, but of course we'll have our mixed events, we'll have our all rain events, and maybe a few all snow events, just depending, obviously. But then to the west, we have below average precipitation in the Midwest, pretty much in the Mississippi Valley, all the way down from Louisiana to Texas, and then up to Oklahoma, Missouri, and then parts of Illinois, maybe. And then much of the central U.S., about average precip here on the December analogs, with the West Coast, the most far, well below average, from Northern California to coastal Oregon, coastal Washington. And once again, this follows our winter outlook that those areas should be pretty dry this upcoming winter, just due to our neutral, or just maybe weak El Nino, but probably neutral, Enso phase. So that's ruling it for December. Heading into January, you can see that we definitely see a pretty big change, in that you are looking at well below average temperatures in the Great Lakes, the Northeast, Northern Plains, with even just slightly below average temperatures all the way down to the Gulf Coast. So that's pretty, that's a pretty big sign of probably what's going to honestly end up being realistic for this upcoming January. It's pretty much a consensus across so many meteorologists, so many forecasters, that this January's not going to be a joke as far as how cold it's going to be. So, and analogs, of course, back that up. We probably wouldn't be saying that, or at least saying it with as much confidence if the analogs didn't back it up, obviously. But Here we are then in the west, slightly above average temps in the west. Makes sense, of course, when you have troughing in the east, an active pattern with, trough after trough in the east. You're probably going to have some ridging out west. Of course, it's obviously dependent on the teleconnections, but, just based off of that, we're seeing minus 7 degrees from normal. You're probably going to have some pretty favorable teleconnections in the east for below average temps. January, as far as precip goes, once again, still an active storm track from the eastern parts of the Midwest, heading into the upper mid-Atlantic and northeast, even in New England. You're looking at, that's 2 inches above average. Now, it doesn't sound like that much. If you're looking at a pattern where most precip falls as snow, and then you have, I'd say, well above average precipitation, that's going to probably end up being a pretty solid month in the snow department for most of these areas from the upper mid-Atlantic into New England. So the analogs are suggesting much elsewhere of the country is pretty much average, and then you still have the West Coast with below average precip and at well below average out of that. So heading into February, here we are with just another month of well below average temperatures in all the same locations, and above average temperatures pretty much in the same locations. And this analog map is really, I'd say, driven by the February 2015 month, because that was a record cold month for much of the east. But, even without that, we'd probably still be looking at well below average temps here on the analog map. But, minus 9 degrees on the analog map, that's not something that you often see. That is probably a pretty good sign if you are looking for if you're looking to freeze your butt off, that's probably a pretty good sign. Now, of course, here in Pennsylvania, I just think of it as if I'm going to freeze, it better be snowing, or else it's not worth it. And when you go over to precipitation, once again, just this active pattern continues. Now, as you can see on the bottom from the key, it's not as above average precip, but you're still looking at above average precip in many of the same locations, from Tennessee to Virginia to much of Pennsylvania, or at least southern PA in this February, and then New Jersey, and then below average precip. This might actually signal a little bit of suppression with storms. You see that below average precip in New England and New York State and Ohio. So perhaps you're looking at more of a southerly track for coastal storms and things like that. That's just what this would, probably suggest, but I'm not saying that that's what we're going to see necessarily for this February, but, that's kind of the look it has. So heading into March, final month of winter, not much has changed here on the analogs. All you see is the West has warmed up really for much of the western U.S., above average temperatures, especially from California, Nevada, Oregon, Wisconsin, Washington, Idaho, and then below average temperatures kind of shifted east a little bit. Now you're looking at the core of below average temperatures really in the Northeast and eastern Great Lakes, and then kind of erodes as you work your way south, about average temperatures in the Southeast. Precip wise, let me just make sure precip wise, once again, it's not too far off, from what we've been seeing here on the analogs for February and January and December. So this is why, I saw this, maybe we had a comment and say, why are you predicting another snowy winter for I-95 and where everybody lives and all your viewers are, and then you're not predicting, an active winter for the Great Lakes when everybody else is? Well, when you have these analogs of, look at February, look at, March, we're looking at dry conditions from the Central Plains into the Midwest and into the Great Lakes. This is why we're predicting dry conditions for your area. If we're going to be well below average temperatures in this region, it makes sense the storms would be a little bit more suppressed to the south, and it'd be a little bit harder to get storms to cut into the Midwest, so that's just how that works. So now it is time for our good old global climate model. So we will start off with the Jamstack. This is pretty much the Japanese weather model. Now, you might be wondering, well, doesn't the short-range JMA kind of suck? Well, sure. But a lot of people consider the Jamstack as probably one of the most accurate seasonal forecast models there is. So here we are taking a look at the Jamstack. Sea surface temperatures, you see a negative EPO look up in the northern Pacific. So, of course, that's our first step in getting what the analogs just suggested in that pattern. Then we have some west-based warmth in the Enzo region, some east-based cool or SSTs. So kind of follows what we're expecting and what we expected back in the winter outlook. Now, when you take a look at the precip, you're looking at above average precip for much of the eastern U.S. I mean, this might be a little bit broad and a little bit maybe too general and not as precise as it could be, but when you're looking at the entire globe, guess you can't make out the fine details. Surface air temperatures, it's really stuck with what it had for October and now into November. This just came out yesterday, I think, and it still was holding with below average temperatures for much of the central and eastern U.S., above average temperatures for the west. And if you look around the globe, we're not seeing many areas of below average temperatures, and yet once again, here we are, the central and eastern U.S., perhaps looking at a relatively cold winter. Now, last winter it wasn't too cold, it was more in the central U.S., and I'd say just anywhere from the Rockies to the Midwest, that's where cold was. But this winter, here we are, the Jamstack once again, showing that it could be in the central and eastern U.S., and, well, let's look what it had for last winter, just because why not? So let's look at November of 2018. All right. Okay, so yeah, this is what you can you can kind of see that this isn't the most reliable model. November of 2018, it had most of the lower 48 and pretty well below average temperatures. Maybe it doesn't make the most sense, but anyways, that's been the Jamstack. Now let's look at the CFS-V2. This is looking at December, January, and February. This is pretty much where the analog's at, and that we have above average precipitation on the East Coast and especially the Southeast, below average precipitation in the West. And then as far as temperatures here on the CFS, here we are. Now, I will say that it's pretty hard for seasonal models to show below average temperatures. It's not common. They kind of like to head towards above average when you get the longer range the longer you go out, I'd say the warmer the bias is for long range models. But even with that being December, January, and February, there is a hint of perhaps below average temperatures for at least the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. So that's the CFS, and that, of course, the West is warm. So that's the CFS monthly, I guess seasonal. It was what we looked at, but here we have the Euro seasonal. So you can see as we work our way into the winter, kind of gets a little bit more active. January, February, March. So once again, our core of above average precipitation from the southeast into the mid-Atlantic. I mean, when you have the analogs, you have the climate. Okay, this is the seasonal climate models. I kind of, said that they were pretty bad, but, I guess the more things you have on your side, regardless of how accurate they may be, the better than the opposite, probably. So here we are with the Euro monthly. So kind of the same thing we've been looking at temperature-wise. Here we are. Yeah, this is just kind of what I was kind of saying. But so December, January, February. I mean, I guess that's a sign that it's normal temperatures in the east. I guess we'll take what we can get. Just for the heck of it, let's go back to October 1st and look what it had for November temperatures. So yeah, it's pretty rough. Needless to say, this is not exactly what happened in November here on the Euro monthly. So this is why we don't tend to look at the monthly models too much, just because they are not exactly accurate, to say the least. And let's just look at what November has actually turned out to be. Actually, I don't know where it is. So anyways, I might show that in a different video, but that is what we are looking at for this upcoming winter as far as our analogs and as well as the climate models. Take it as you will, but that's what we're looking at. Anyways, thanks for watching, everybody, and stay tuned for more videos.